Hey everyone, this is Tom from Tutor Bros. Today we're going to go over how to solve quadratic equations using the quadratic formula. So remember that the quadratic formula is x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a, where a is the coefficient of the squared term, b is the coefficient of the linear term, and c is the constant term. Now, the beauty of this method is that we can use it for any quadratic equation. We don't have to worry about whether the solutions are rational or irrational or anything like that. So all we have to do in using this method is move all of our terms to one side of the equation and set them equal to 0, identify our a, b, and c terms, and then plug them into the formula. So let's do a couple together. We'll start with number 1, which I'll copy down here. X squared minus 5x plus 6 is equal to 0. Now remember that the first step is to move all of our terms to one side of the equation and set it equal to 0, but that's already been done for us, so we don't have to worry about that here. Next thing we want to do is identify our a, b, and c terms. I usually like to write a little list out like this. So if a is the coefficient of the squared term, then in this case a is equal to 1. B is the coefficient of the linear term, so that's going to be negative 5. And c is the constant term, so that's going to be equal to 6. Now we've identified a, b, and c. All that's left to do is to just plug those values into the quadratic formula to solve for x. So we'll do that over here. So we have x equals negative b. So in this case, if b is negative 5, then negative b would be negative 5, or just positive 5. And then plus or minus the square root of b squared, so that's negative 5 squared, minus 4 times a, which is 1, times c, which is 6. I'll extend that a little bit, all over 2 times a, which again is 1. Right, now we'll do some simplifying. So we can say x is equal to 5 plus or minus the square root of negative 5 squared is positive 25, minus 4 times 1 times 6, which is 24. That's all over 2 times 1, which we can just express as 2. Okay, now let's do some more simplifying. X is equal to 5 plus or minus. Now let's simplify this whole radical term. So we have 25 minus 24. That's equal to 1. And then if we take the square root of that, that is, again, going to be equal to 1. So we can say 5 plus or minus 1 divided by 2. Alrighty, now what we can do is we can set up two different equations to solve for x in this particular problem. So we can say that x is equal to 5, keep that there, plus 1 divided by 2. Or we can say that x is equal to 5 minus 1 divided by 2. All right, and then we just evaluate both of those expressions. So if we have 5 plus 1, it's equal to 6 over 2. So x is equal to 6 over 2, which we can simplify to 3. And then in the second case, it's 5 minus 1 over 2, so that's 4 over 2, which we can simplify to get 2. And that's it. These would be the solutions to the first quadratic equation, x equals 3 and x equals 2. Alrighty, let's try a few more together. Let's try one where the coefficient of the squared term is greater than 1. So let's erase all that, and we'll start over. Right? We'll copy number 2 down. So 2x squared plus 5x equals 12. Now the process is no different whether or not the leading coefficient or the coefficient of the square term is 1 or anything other than 1. So the first step here would be to move all our terms to one side of the equation. So we can just subtract 12 on both sides. We'll have 2x squared plus 5x minus 12 equals 0. And then we'll identify our a, b, and c terms again. A, b, c. So in this case, A is going to be equal to 2, B will be equal to 5, and C will be equal to negative 12. Right? And then we'll plug those into the quadratic formula to solve. So we can say that x is equal to negative b, so that's going to be negative 5, plus or minus the square root of 5 squared minus 4 times 2 times negative 12 all over 2 times a, which is 2. Right? And we'll do our simplifying again. X equals negative 5 plus or minus the square root of 25 minus 4 times 2 is 8 times negative 12 is negative 96. This is all over 2 times 2, which is 4. Okay, let's keep going. So x is equal to negative 5 plus or minus, and then we can simplify the radical expression by doing 25 minus negative 96, which is the same as 25 plus positive 96, which is 121. And then if we take the square root of that, that's going to be 11. So we can say negative 5 plus or minus 11 over 4. And then we do the same as before, where we create two equations and then solve both of those for x. So I'm just going to scroll up a little bit here. Ready? And then we will set up our two equations. So let's just separate these out. So we can say that x is equal to negative 5 plus 11 divided by 4. And x is also equal to negative 5 minus 11 divided by 4. And then we just evaluate both of those. So x is equal to negative 5 plus 11 is 6 over 4, which we can simplify to 3 halves. Or x is equal to negative 5 minus 11 is negative 16 over 4, which is equal to negative 4. So the solution to this quadratic equation would be x is equal to 3 halves and x is equal to negative 4. Alrighty, let's try one more. So far we've been pretty lucky to have equations where the solutions are rational numbers, but sometimes the solutions will be irrational. And even though the method works just as well in either case, it can be a little bit tricky when the solutions are irrational. So let's try one of those together. All right, we'll copy down number 3 here. So we have x squared plus 7x equals 4. Okay, first thing we do, move all of our terms to one side of the equation. So then we'll have x squared plus 7x minus 4 equals 0. So all we did was just subtract 4 on both sides. All right, now we want to identify our a, b, and c terms. I'll write that over here. All right, so in this case, a is going to be equal to 1, b will be equal to 7, and c will be equal to negative 4. All right, and then we'll plug all this information into the quadratic formula. So we can say that x is equal to negative b, so that's going to be negative 7, plus or minus the square root of 7 squared minus 4 times 1 times negative 4. And that's all over 2a, or 2 times 1. Alrighty, now we will simplify again. X is equal to negative 7 plus or minus the square root of 7 squared is 49 minus 4 times 1 times negative 4, which is going to be negative 16. This is all over 2 times 1, or just 2. Alrighty. Now we can say that x is equal to -7 plus or minus. Now when we try to simplify the radical expression here, what we'll find is that we can't reduce it as easily as we did before, because we are not going to have a perfect square that we can find the square root of. So if we do 49 minus -16, that's the same as 49 plus +16, which would be the square root of 65. Now, notice that I left it in radical form because we can't take the square root of 65. It's going to be an irrational number. So we'll just leave it in radical form, and then we will just move on as we normally would. So we can say it's -7 plus or minus square root of 65 all over 2. Okay? And then I'll scroll up one more time, just a little bit. I want to keep everything in the frame. But now we can create our two equations again. I'll just write them over here. So we can have x equals -7 plus square root of 65 over 2. And we can have x equals -7 minus square root of 65 all over 2. Now, because we're leaving it in radical form, we actually can't do any further simplifying in this case. Your teacher or instructor may ask you to find the irrational number when you take the square root and round it to a certain decimal place. But for our purposes, we're just going to leave it in radical form, so we can say that the solution to this quadratic equation would be these two numbers here. We can just leave it as -7 plus the square root of 65 over 2, and -7 minus the square root of 65 over 2.